Welcome. Happy Monday. Good stuff. All right. Excited to have everybody here for this Knowledge Production Update Space Planning Edition. And we're just going to, throughout this session, we really want your feedback. So hence the little index cards. I also found golf pencils this morning, and it was just this moment where I've never been so excited to see golf pencils. So I just really went for it. So just kind of looking at, and also these questions are located on the boards as we go through, in case you forget. That's what I would do anyway. So so that's kind of what we're interested in, gathering some information. And we are really going to just kind of go through some of, we'll talk a little bit more about what it is we're going to really explain, and then give ourselves some time to discuss and ask questions. I'm the kind of person who really likes to think about it and write it down. So that's why I provided the index cards. But there's also, people who really want to talk it out, and I get that. So you're welcome to do that toward the end when we have some time for discussion. So without any further ado, I'm going to invite Maggie up here to talk a little bit first.
Thanks, John. So happy Monday. Had we thought about this, we would have brought caffeinated beverages on a Monday morning. But anyway, it's good to have you all here talking about the Knowledge Production Lab. And you've probably heard me refer to it to a variety of things, the Knowledge Lab. Sometimes we'll call it the Creativity Innovation Lab. So all of those words have to do with what is going to happen in this space. So before we talk a little bit about some of the specifics, John and I thought it would be good to go in the time back machine and think about the history of this coming about. So I unfortunately was not with you for this discussion, but you all were here in the discussion, and this has really been in the works since 2014. So it's a long time coming. And there are other academic libraries who are in this space. Some of my previous experience had pieces and parts of this space, so I can tell you a little bit from my experience how it was used. So this has been in the works for probably about 3 years. Positions have been allocated for it. But now we're at the point where we actually get to build it. And you're probably saying, well, what will it all entail? And that's what today is about. Fundamentally, knowledge and learning happens in a variety of formats. So we traditionally in libraries think about knowledge contained in books and journals, and then offshoots of that, microform, electronic books, electronic journals, databases that aggregate it all together. But really, knowledge and learning occur in a variety of formats. So that might be a theater production, it might be art, it might be visualization of data. And so what we are working on is really an extension of what we've always done in libraries, and that is create a space that collects and makes accessible knowledge, create spaces where knowledge is created, where learning happens. So we're really still focused on knowledge and learning. We also think of LEAD as an extension of the classroom. So the Knowledge Production Lab will be an extension of the classroom, and so it complements our instruction mission. So that's one of the reasons why its location is so critical, because we know instruction happens at the reference desk, through our interactions with students as they come into the building, at the circulation desk. It happens within our classrooms. So placing this in a location that takes advantage of our strong instructional mission means that we're being very purposeful about this. And I think one of the strengths that John brings to this position is that he is thinking about the programming and instruction, not just the activity that happens, but that activity is rooted within our instructional mission. This will involve every discipline. So a lot of times when we think about a knowledge production lab, or we think about 3D printing or other visual capabilities, we often think of the sciences, or we often think of engineering. Particularly for 3D printing and virtual reality, we're thinking of gaming and engineering, but this will cross every discipline across the university. It also means it will cross every team, every department, every division within the libraries. So we need your feedback on how you see yourself, how you see your department fitting into this. So some ideas, digital humanities, for instance, often take advantage of such spaces. How about if we know that we have a theater production, how can a student capture a snippet of that, save that file, and then incorporate it within an assignment or within a presentation? So often we think about STEM or just the science, technology, engineering, mathematics, but actually this will involve every discipline throughout the university. It will involve every department that exists within the libraries. This is uncharted territory. Although we know there are some examples out there that we can follow and that we can learn from what they have done, to create such a space, there's no template for it. Everyone is different. Everyone is unique to the needs of their local institutions. So I want you to not get too caught up in what the final product will be, because what it looks like in the fall of 2018 will probably look vastly different in fall of 2020. And that's because technology is changing. We're experimenting with this. So we need to be flexible. That's really hard for us as librarians and library employees sometimes to be, because we really don't know how students will use it. They will come with their creativity and crazy ideas, and then we'll be reacting to that and implementing it. But as Jason can tell you with the technology, it will move faster than our budget can move. So we want, as we go into this, we want you to be open, understand that some things might not work well, or they might work differently than we anticipated. So uncharted territory. I mentioned that we had budgets started, budgets were started in 2014 and 2015 for personnel, but the equipment budget is not really funded well at this point. So we're not sure of the ongoing funding that's required, and that's part of the uncharted territory. So we'll do some initial investment in technology now. We'll build things that might not be exactly the way that we want it. For instance, virtual reality. So there is a virtual reality studio on campus. It's hard to get into. It's only certain people can use it. It's very decked out. And our virtual reality will be a little bit more vanilla, a little less cost. It won't be a cardboard box with a pinhole in it. We promise you that. But we want to make sure, since we really don't have a budget set aside and we're working with students, that you understand that what we have to start with might not be the ideal, but we'll work with it and we'll just keep building on this project. And finally, as John noted, today is about you. It's about how you see yourself fitting into this. We need your ideas. In order for this to be successful, it takes a team of the divisions, the department, and other individuals to make this work. So again, thank you for coming, and we're glad that we have this time to talk about it today. John?
Okay, and just for those who came in after the start, I just wanted to point out that we are soliciting feedback. This is in the session, but also we invite you to write your comments, questions, answers to these questions on the side here and on this slide on these, and we'll collect these. And you're welcome to put your name on it if you'd like us to respond, or remain semi-anonymous, because I feel like I know a lot of handwriting in this room, you know. And I also just wanted to open up too and say, you know, if you wanted to email, if you're a person who likes to write a document, you know, kind of feedback style, then by all means, email box open to that. So we're just going to go through some of the overview of planning this planning process, what that looks like, our description of these new directions for the department and for this library, and the new spaces designated for these directions. We'll talk a little bit about our next steps, and then we'll have plenty of time for questions and discussions. Just a little bit about us and knowledge production. We're a very new department. We are, kind of learning as we go along. So a lot of this process for us has just been an exercise in inquiry. And our hope, throughout this process is to be as transparent as possible with everyone. And I know that, sometimes there's gaps in knowledge, and we really want to try and fill those gaps as much as possible, through these sort of forums and less formal communication. So, but we'll be learning through kind of this process, and then getting feedback, reflecting on that feedback, and then creating change through that. So that's sort of our idea of how to move through this process of learning and building a new department, and especially with new spaces in areas that we haven't necessarily explored before. So a little bit more detail about information gathering, and there were a number of ways that the administration kind of pulled information for quite a while. We went through a really kind of a longer period where we were just exploring options, learning about the needs. So we learned about what different schools were doing through liaison reports, staff focus groups, led by several folks who did a really great job of recording some of the ideas and the unmet needs that they found through those staff focus groups. Those were staff here in the library. And then general unmet needs, kind of we kept track of what we were seeing, what requests we were getting. So someone would say, hey, I really need to map this idea using a GIS layer. How does that work? And we just kind of kept track of those. We also did the Ithaca survey, which actually kind of shined a lot of light on how faculty and graduate students would like more professional development in teaching technologies and research technologies, but didn't feel they had the support to do so. And I also had a lot of opportunity to look at model institutions. I've done some site visits at the University of Michigan, who has a similar program. I did designing libraries, where I went to Chapel Hill and North Carolina State University and Duke University. And kind of as Maggie said, a lot of these spaces, as I was going through them and learning what they do and how they do it, I learned more and more that, a lot of it grew organically, that they learned through trial and error. I think, we can definitely learn from a lot of our colleagues' mistakes. I know that there's a lot less kind of reinventing the wheel, knowing what these model institutions are doing. And I know that these are all ARL libraries, and they have a lot of resources. So we're trying to be smart moving forward with the way we approach this. So I just wanted to give a little background about how we gathered this information to kind of come to conclusions about these new directions that we're headed in. So, sort of looking at this overall, the overall kind of goal for this comes straight from the library's strategic framework, is, just to provide this space and innovative tools and skilled assistance for researchers. So offering this interdisciplinary space for conversations around research and for building professional development into people's work. around these new technologies and new needs in research and learning. This space is for budding researchers, graduate students, and expert researchers alike from multiple disciplines, kind of in a shared, hands-on, interactive research environment. We want to engage learners in research with an interest in making new connections with things like spatial and numeric data, prototyping for developing ideas, digital media. We want to offer kind of this interdisciplinary space where we can bridge programs and disciplines. So in this kind of space, we're including things like visualization software and modeling software, high-end graphic processors, and immersive large-scale displays, access to specialty software packages, sort of three-dimensional printing equipment and rapid prototyping and design opportunities, as well as areas for one-on-one and group consultation, workshops, guest lectures, and presentations. So after all of this kind of information gathering, what we did was kind of find that we were leaning toward these 7 zones where we would see this kind of learning and research and interdisciplinary work happening. Multimedia production, and I'll break all of these down as we go. Printing and scanning, data visualization, virtual reality, ideation and consultation, workshop space, and a service point to help to tie all of that in together and to provide support in all those areas. So I'll start just kind of breaking down Zone 1, multimedia production. This is something that we've actually been a part of for a long time with our multimedia lab here. And this was really guided by a lot of our unmet needs on campus and discussions with faculty in our Creative Research Assignment Institute, looking for spaces for students to actually create their own videos, not just edit them using our software, but be able to find a room where they can go in and push one button and easily record themselves giving a presentation or performing a skit, playing an instrument. And likewise with recording and music, this all kind of came through a series of unmet needs that we discovered. That we were interested in creating more sound files and then editing those sound files. So rather than what we've been doing, which is just kind of on that post-production end, allowing people to edit materials once they already have them, we wanted to give them a space to create those materials. So these are both areas for recording, developing music, podcasting, research interviews, and the like. So a second part to that really is this other area where we build out more space for people to use a variety of platforms, Mac and PC, for the post-production aspect of this. So what do you do with a raw video file once you have it? And how do you make it how do you clean it up and make it look pretty? And then, adding some of the other elements of the software that we need for other areas too. So adding some access to data visualization software and 3D modeling software. And giving them some high-performing computers that can really take the heavy load that some of these software packages really pack in to a PC or a Mac. So Zone 2, printing and scanning. These on the left are some images that I took from the University of Michigan. These are large 3D scanning that they're doing, kind of in that white space, and then tiny 3D scanning that they're doing with a little rabbit. This also kind of came from our unmet needs that we looked at, and looking at sort of how people coming in asking if they can use our digitization software in the digitization lab. So looking to scan books for their research. So we already offer large format printing, and we wanted to collaborate with our other libraries on campus where this was happening to sort of streamline and codify our approach to printing for our community. So we're looking at expanding our printing services, offering more, and then also putting it out in the open, letting people see that this is all happening. And I just want to say, too, that in all of these zones, a lot of the space that we have that we're starting to learn about and we're starting to plan is all really flexible. So, you know, I'm really serious when I say we're just going in these directions. And I think we'll start to see, you know, these spaces will build as we move on, and they'll grow. But these are sort of the places that we're starting in. So data visualization. This was really another direction that kind of came through our unmet needs through the Dean's Directs, but also from a really great focus group that Star and Mark did with graduate students, and learning about their kind of data needs and some of the professional development that they need in data visualization. So I think this is definitely something that will begin really small. So this week we have our data visualization and GIS specialists coming in to interview, and those people will obviously be very integral to the development of this and helping us build infrastructure. I think the thing you see on the left comes from Georgia State, and I think that that's kind of like big picture, you know. Something that we might be doing is on the right, you know, to start out with. We'll have a couple of screens, a space for people to present their work or examine, you know, data visualization or present it, you know, to a group in kind of a smaller scale. So we're starting small here. And kind of growing up to see. But I think that this area is kind of obviously, you know, there's one sort of, there isn't a whole lot of space that's dedicated to this. It's really just sort of the work of this new position that will help to sort of ignite all of the activity around data visualization and our connections with data visualization in our campus. So, so definitely more to see. More to come with data visualization. Virtual reality. So this was you know, an initiative from the administration and Key. I don't know if Key's here. Is Key here? No? Okay, so Key got us started with virtual reality and did a lot of really great work designing this from the start. Going out and doing demonstrations for faculty in the health sciences, as well as in architecture, and really kind of drumming up a lot of interest in learning and assessing those sessions, and getting a lot of information about what are some of the curricular needs around virtual reality and the research needs around virtual reality. And, you know, so we've had this pilot running all fall, and we've learned a lot. We actually have quite a few people using it because it's connected to our anatomy and physiology courses. And they're coming in to use the equipment as an extra credit assignment. And so we're gathering a lot of information through a survey, and I think that will help to guide us through the more development of this space. But again, it will be kind of a cross between these group instruction that you see on the left and individual kind of consultation on the right for classes. But I also had a lot of interest from faculty in different disciplines who are interested in using virtual reality in their own research. So I think that there's also the potential for some special projects to come along with this as well. Ideation, consultation. Ideation is a term that really kind of comes from the design world. It is kind of this creative process of generating and developing and communicating new ideas, building on each other. And these are really just sort of open spaces with different types of seating, soft seating, flexible seating, and different technologies, whiteboards, whiteboard tables, and you know, these here on the left is a Jamboard from Google. It is a kind of a whiteboard that syncs with Google applications, so it kind of works seamlessly with Google and allows you know, a lot of sharing of documents, as well as just writing on a whiteboard and recording it in your own Google Drive. So these are the kind of spaces that we want, taking into consideration that design is a process that starts with ideation. It starts with ideas and generating those ideas in groups, individually. So we wanted to provide a space for all of that so that then the idea could grow to prototypes, or it could grow to you know, a project on the visualization wall, a presentation. but we wanted to kind of bake all of that into to the space and to the department. 6, our workshop. So this is probably our, kind of it's probably our most flexible space right now. These are examples of what kind of, I think, the more traditional maker spaces are at different places. This is, one that's from the New York City School for Science on the left, and then this is from Chapel Hill, where I visited. And really, it's an open space with a lot of flexible seating and with a lot of capabilities for power and ventilation. And we can kind of make it what we want it to be. I think one thing that we've noticed through some exploration with faculty at different departments is that there's a lot of need for prototyping and 3D printing. So that's one technology that we're interested in beginning with. But I think that we will honestly be reaching out to faculty and staff in the libraries, as well as teaching faculty and students outside to see what else they'd like to see in this space. So some of the more traditional technologies that you see in these spaces are laser cutters, circuit boards. You can see a full-on workshop with like a drill press. So we really kind of wanted to open the space up to make it, to give a lot of possibility, but not necessarily try to decide exactly what it is we want to do in that space right off the bat on day one. So the workshop is something that we'll be exploring with everyone as we move forward. Last but not least, Service Point. So this is a space kind of central to all of these in adjacency, all of these other zones. And this will be staffed by student employees who have training in kind of a basic training in all areas, but may specialize in some. Some may have special projects that they're working on in spaces like the data visualization lab and the workshop. They're there to support other people who are trying these new technologies for the first time or have any kind of troubleshooting needs. So this will be a space for one-on-one and small group assistance. They'll be able to leave this desk and move elsewhere within the zones and within the space, and or sit down with them and kind of go through how to edit a video at this desk. It'll be a very open desk, and we're also looking at kind of opportunities for open instruction on the main floor. So we're looking at the possibility of having just instruction happen at this space, whether it be about these technologies or about or information literacy instruction. It would be open to everyone in the library, special collections instruction, and we're looking at sort of small, maybe microbursts of information that would happen in this space, open to everybody walking by, but definitely set at different times of the day. And this is just an idea that we have. It's not necessarily set in stone, but this is an example from Harvard Science Library, where they're doing something similar, where a screen comes down and they can do kind of a small group instruction, or they can just open instruction up to the rest of the library. So this is a service point that's obviously going to be very flexible and allow for anyone to kind of wander up and ask for help, but also could offer some different ways of showcasing what it is we do here and what it is we have here. So this is, I know, a little difficult to see. But this is Rosemary approved layout of the first floor. And we have kind of, if you look, it starts sort of left to right at the top. This is, sorry, I'm without the mic. Staff space, sort of our post-production space, just clusters of computers as well as room for group editing. Some ideation and consultation, data visualization space, virtual reality in green, printing and scanning. This is the service point. This is the workshop. And then this is the multimedia production spaces. So those are the sort of the recording booth for video and audio. So that's kind of where things are blobbed out at this point. They're not necessarily clearly defined if you get down to a really granular level. So we've just sort of spaced it out a little bit. And I'll share these slides with everyone too in my follow-up email, along with the recording of this presentation. So we've gone on for about 30 minutes. We'll definitely come back to this if you have questions about it, but I just want to talk a little bit about next steps. So we have a lot of really great infrastructure coming in to help with this space, and I'm really excited about the Task Force for Digital Scholarship headed by our Thomas Padilla. In the back, everybody. So we're going to kind of work through, I think, a lot of the workflows that we'll look for accumulating sort of special projects with these spaces as well. If we have requests from faculty to do a research project in this space, what will that look like, and how will we kind of gather our expertise as a library, and how will we prioritize work? My next phase, we did a lot of information gathering for a long time, and so we made these decisions, but now we're back kind of at this information gathering phase. And I think I'm most excited about meeting with everybody in this library and talking a little bit about what can happen in these new directions, and where they see their work intersect. So I also, I would like to I'll start to organize some individual meetings with folks and open it up to talk with people individually, if that's how you like to roll. I'm also really kind of hoping to meet with departments to kind of gather ideas as a group, and see where they'd like to see themselves in these directions, and also where people see their professional development needs in these new directions. So we have all of this new technology. To what level would we all like to be able to understand this and know how it operates in order to tell other people about it and help other people in those spaces? So what level of involvement do people want to have? Moving beyond the walls of the library, discussions with teaching faculty and students about needs in these areas is also really important. I think we got a lot of really great information in the beginning, and now we're kind of interested in getting a little more granular and looking at what it is people would like to actually do in these spaces, where they see their work, their students interacting here. I've already been able to do this with a couple of folks, and just talk to some faculty members, and I think it's one of those things where we have to kind of it's good to get people excited. We also have to sort of be organized about our approach to, to what kind of curricular connections we're going to have in this space, and ongoing sustainable curricular connections, as well as kind of like drop-in co-curricular people who just want to come in and do a little project for a day. And then also, how do we balance that out with special projects that faculty may have that want to utilize this space, and the Digital Projects Task Force, how would they like to leverage that to complete their own research? So I think those are sort of the our next steps, and I think right now. We're just really interested in hearing what if anybody has questions, what people have to say. If you're a processor and want to write it down on your card, go for it. If you want to just bring it up here, we have plenty of time to talk about it, and we have, I think, a lot of the people in the room who can answer questions if you have them. Yes, and we need to use microphones. This is where I really shine. Oh, you sure? Okay.
In institutions that have established spaces like these, what have you heard about student response?
Student response in regard to the use of these spaces. I've seen all different types. I've seen people who said, like, we couldn't really get anyone here until they really started programming the space, getting some curricular connections and really getting organized about it. And then I had some people say that they just opened on day one and they found the space within 3 hours, and it was just, it was it. That was time. So the students were there and it was their space. So they were creating and doing kind of what they do in those spaces. So I think it's going to vary, but I think that's what I've learned from all these other institutions.
Is this on? I can see, obviously, with the workshop and the video and audio production units, those are isolated units, for noise and whatnot. Are you, how are you segregating the other units, or are they, or is it just gonna be open space?
So the idea is that all of this will be really out in the open. We want people to be able to see other people using it, to inspire them. I know that's how I became an instruction librarian, was just by seeing it happen in the library, out in the open, behind a glass wall. And so that's kind of how we want to generate these ideas and motivation to explore, is by having a lot of this just out in the open on the right. Mm-hmm. Kelly.
I would just add that in these spaces, in most academic libraries, there is a trend for it to be out in the open, and even spaces that are closed for glass walls, so there's a visual impact as students walk by and see data visualization, for example, or the virtual reality. So where the students come in, and what ends up happening is the students sometimes bring their faculty to see what's available. But John has already made several connections to faculty members who are very interested in what we're doing in this space because they're using similar technologies or introducing them into their classes and are very excited about the fact that the library will have this kind of technology in a space that students can use, lots of open hours. Sorry.
My primary concern is like the design and ideation group next to, I don't know, one of the other groups. Is there going to be something like glass walls to separate everybody to kind of make for noise containment? That's my question.
Yeah, the idea is that we want that space to be open. There may be some glass walls.
Yeah.
We haven't necessarily gotten down to exactly what spaces will be completely enclosed. This one has some walls around it for kind of a potential classroom space around data visualization, but everything else is in the open.
Okay.
So yeah, it would be kind of as it is now, where we're sort of on computers doing their own thing, or in a large group right next to each other. Oh, thanks.
All right.
But the video recording rooms are all in.
Yes.
They are keeping up the walls for noise attenuation.
Well, I wasn't concerned about that. I assumed you guys had that covered.
Yeah. Oh.
So, as Jason pointed out, down on the bottom, the audio and recording studios will be enclosed and soundproofed in order to enable that. The maker space is in a more contained space because of, again, ventilation and the kinds of things that need to happen in that space. The rest of it will be open. Currently, the research assistance desk and computer help desks and the enclosed workspaces that have all the disability stations and the reference collection don't have to move in this model, but that's not to say that those won't move over time. We just don't have to move them out of the way because of pending construction.
based on this layout. But Jen will be exploring some options around a longer-term view of maybe where research assistants and computer help might need to go. It's just that once we began this planning, we thought that might become an immediate need, that it would have to move out of a construction zone. With this layout, it doesn't, but it doesn't mean that the rest of that space won't also evolve accordingly. We can just plan in a more relaxed way without having to do it to get everything out of the way for renovation that begins in the spring. And then with everything done, we would have summer to kind of see what happens, and then it would kind of probably our opening would be in the fall, but summer would be a little bit of a soft opening.
Kelly.
People can hear me though, right?
No, we have to for the recording. This one works.
So this is awkward because this might be a question for you, Maggie, and you're like standing right next to me. But I just want, so Pat kind of answered my question. You're thinking sort of launch fall 2018, soft launchy in that space. I think I want to know more how this intersects with fundraising and marketing, you know, hard hat tours, how we're promoting this. But it seems like some of the ideas that are going into it are, like you said, are very flexible. So I think I want to know when things start to become defined in a way that we're telling more of a story. I mean, you can tell a story here with the zones, but it sounds like it's open to a lot more feedback and, you know, what the campus needs. So how does, I guess, I wanted to make sure as that becomes more tightly defined that we're working with Sean and I just to maximize awareness.
So Kelly, that's a great question, and we can sell pieces, parts, and the entire space. So even though it's very flexible and it's very changing, the concepts continue on. So I think it would be very appealing for our donors. But I think right now at this stage, it might be difficult for some of our donors to kind of wrap their heads around it as well. And because these spaces are so unique, like for instance, UCLA has a space that looks completely different from this, that's different from the University of Washington. It's different from the Adobe studio that we had at Clemson. So all of these spaces are so unique, and then the offerings are tailored for the university. So I wish we could pull out something that says this is exactly what you ought to build. Oh, another good example are Fab Labs at MIT and University of Texas at Arlington. Yeah, they have a Fab Lab. And you walk in there and you think you're in somebody's garage. And oh, by the way, the circulation desk is on the other side. And there are computers mixed in throughout the space. So you have somebody who's on a sewing machine next to somebody who's at a 3D printer, next to somebody who's writing an English project, across the hall from somebody who's checking out a book. So yeah, it's very hard to say this is exactly what it is. But I think the concepts are items that would be appealing for a donor. I think they'd be appealing for students because ultimately it's about students' instruction and curriculum, and it feeds really well into our top-tier research plan because helping faculty and students with their research is what this space will also be about. So data visualization or pulling together a variety of data into new knowledge would be rather exciting in this area. So we might have somebody who's coming from the social sciences and working with our GIS specialist to overlay what that looks like depending on what that topic is. So it's gonna be cool, but it is something where we're like, we're not exactly sure how it will work out, but I'll echo what Pat has said, and that is people, Pat and John have said that people come in and they'll just come in droves in this space. I'm pretty confident of that. That was a long answer, Patrick.
So I'm actually curious as to how data analysis software, more traditional ones, will be fitting into these zones and support for those fitting into these zones, because I can see it maybe in the the visualization zone, and maybe even zone 7 with the student employees. But I just wondered, I know it's really preliminary at this point, but things like SPSS data or qualitative data analysis tools, like where would these kind of fit within the zones and support around those kind of tools?
Yeah, I think that they would, since it's kind of a, these are software packages. These would primarily start here and likely end up here. You know, so when they're creating data visualization and working with these packages, but then any kind of presentation or output could happen in this yellow space here in the data visualization kind of area. So I see that kind of happening in those two spaces, but I think that there's also room for other ideas. So be interested to hear what other people have to say about that. Yes. Oh.
I think what we see is that there's going to be hardware and software. There's going to be certain things that we'll have day one that might be packages that are being used now. This space begins to become an area where faculty and students can come to learn about or to experiment with packages that we have. And then that could lead into more formal one-on-one instruction or small group instruction that's either tied to a class or a research project. But the capabilities of this new space with the data visualization, for example, is they'll be able to go beyond the analysis and actually have a space where they can begin to look at plotting out data on maps or looking at those things. And so this is where I think when John talks about, and Maggie, about this involving the whole library, is this unit's going to end up working, I think, very closely, particularly with liaisons and with teaching and learning librarians, because it's going to become more blended about the fact that as a project comes up, say for a class, there might be a small team that ends up working together to help facilitate the work of that class, or a research project. And then, as John's noted, on day one, we won't have every package kind of mapped out to exactly what we need. But then as technology develops or new packages come out, we'll have the capacity in these flexible spaces to test out and experiment with hardware and software as to whether or not it's viable or relevant to our needs here, and then begin that process of introducing it. So I think what's going to happen is in year 2, what we have on the floor and in these spaces is going to look different than what we had on day 1. And that'll continue to evolve because it becomes a little bit of the experimentation space. And that could be experimentation for library staff as well as for university faculty and students. So it becomes kind of more of it's really a collaboration zone that's built around teaching, learning, knowledge production, and so on. So it sort of brings together and merges all of this.
Okay.
Thank you. I'm curious, in your evaluation of other spaces, if you've seen anything in terms of differentiation between how faculty use the space versus how students use the space and the services that are there.
Yeah, I think there's, it varies by place, and honestly by zone, for all of these different places that I've done site visits on. So I know that, I think, again, like there's this, I I think there's the curricular tie that I've seen where faculty bring their students in to these spaces, and there's a very designated sort of use in class time, and then sort of in an auxiliary approach where they come in smaller groups later on, and that's kind of how students have used the spaces, and then faculty come in to do their own research and use and work with the people who staff that space, the people in that department as collaborators to kind of carry out their research in that space. So I think, though, it can all happen sort of simultaneously. I don't think there has to be kind of like a Adult Swim or like a kind of any sort of saying like this is when faculty will use the space. Is that kind of what does that answer your question? Oh, do you want to go?
I think, again, it's a little local, Thomas. I've been involved in 3 of these spaces. I was involved in the planning for the UCLA one, which was in what was the graduate library. So in that space, the graduate students came first, and then they introduced the faculty to it. And then in some of these open spaces, as we brought in NIH to do digital humanities camps and things like that, it became a space that was predominantly used by faculty and grad students, sometimes for classes, but a lot more for research and to explore kind of what the potential was. And then it was used a lot as space for grant-funded projects that were in the digital scholarship arena. Emory was very similar in that it was predominantly the grad students, and then some faculty, those leading edge faculty who were involved and wanted to do some of those things, and it became a center for digital scholarship for the campus. Oklahoma's was more aimed at the undergrads, and the undergrads literally took 3 hours, and then we were throwing them out when we closed the library at night. But they were the ones who brought in the faculty to show them the space. And then we found faculty members who were figuring out ways to introduce these kinds of technologies into the classroom with the goal of like their students leaving a class and understanding GIS technology. And so then we became more integrated into the curriculum. But my experience, and Maggie's sounds very similar, is that you can start out with basics, but it's going to be driven really locally by the types of academic programs you have and what's going on. So John's connected with folks in fine arts, like in entertainment engineering. They're very interested in some of this, architecture, engineering, and it probably what'll happen is we don't have to advertise it much in my experience. What happens is you let the projects come to you, and then through word of mouth, that leads to other things. And then some stuff becomes more commonly used, so that's where student workers can fill in gaps and do training and so on, and then the staff can focus on the newer, more emerging technologies. But it's going to look different here than it's looked for me at other places, and then for any of you who've experienced this somewhere else, because it really does have to be locally driven.
I've got another practical question. I'm a bit of a dilettante. I have a broad background, and I have a background in both audio production and I've actually worked in television and things like that. So when I'm thinking about the audio video spaces as well as the workshop, is there going to be like a dock door, for lack of a better phrase? Is there going to be a way for people to bring in the large pieces of equipment that go directly or at least adjacent to those spaces, or are they going to be coming through the main doors with an 8-piece drum kit? I mean, how is that going to work? Because whenever these spaces are being used and they have large items because somebody wants to record their drum set, or they're going to do a scene from the Ghost Sonata and need to have an atrium set up for their scene that they're shooting. How is that stuff going to be getting in and out of the building?
I think those are great questions. I think we've definitely started talking with Rosemary about like the space allocation and giving the size to the room. There'll definitely be larger rooms for larger sort of productions. and and then a simple version. But the idea of kind of like how people will bring that into the library and into the space, it hasn't necessarily been worked out yet.
I would also add that we can't be everything to all individuals. So if somebody's coming in and they're doing a large musical production, for instance, no, exactly. So we might not be able to meet that need, but hopefully we, through our development of expertise, can refer somebody to the appropriate space that would accommodate that. So knowing that we can't do everything and be everything, but similar to our collections, we can't have every book in the world, but hopefully we're referring people to the right places to get their information, or doing interlibrary loan or other means. So is that okay? All right, I'll go over here. Oh, you got it? Feel like it's a competition.
So my question has to do with the student staff, where you get them, and how that impacts the rest of the library divisions or departments trying to staff, because every semester is a mad scramble for student staff. So is there like a pay differential you're planning, or what model are you using to minimize the impact of hiring as many students as you'd need against the needs of the rest of the library?
Pat, do you have any response to that?
We're starting to work on that for the fall semester. I don't know that we have made any of those granular decisions yet. There are a couple of models out there. In 2016, Rosemary and Patty and I went to Calgary, and they have a model where they hire students that they call digital media mentors. I think it's a program that sounds like it has some similarities to our peer coaches program. So there are some aspects to the fact that we may be looking for special skills in some cases. So there might be some programs like computer science or other engineering where those students will be more likely to be attracted to some of these kinds of positions. But we're going to have to work out some of the details of like the students who might do duties in the maker space versus the students who might be on the floor. The other variable we have to look at is the computer help desk students, and what aspects of this might we be able to cross-train. So we're in conversations with Jen. We realize there might be some overlap, and then as some of these things, if they're more common packages, we may be able to train some of the computer help desk students to have some crossover. They've already been doing some of the media lab things, so some of the software that's currently in place that will be in the new space and then related could be something that those students would also help. So we may have a blending of services, but we haven't worked out all those details yet.
It sounds like you're talking about a lot of people.
I don't know that we have to have a lot of people at this point. We are moving with the idea that John's area will be more of a by appointment consultation basis. We may have core hours during the day, and then later in the day and on weekends it would be by appointment. It's set up in advance and so on. So it's not going to be it's not the same kind of model as the circulation desk where we have to have a certain number of people there every single hour. Many of these spaces are designed without a discernible service point. There may be one that functions at it, but the people who work in that area tend to float around. So those are aspects that we realize, but as we open it up over the summer, we may see patterns develop, and then we may have to adjust accordingly. Very often you can figure out peak times in the same way that Jen figures out peak times and you all figure out peak times for your service desks and staff accordingly. Those are things that we'll learn over time. So far you have been doing a lot of consultations, one-on-one and in small groups, like for the virtual reality pilot. So I think we don't have a service point right now. It's not like we're going from a model with a service point to one without. So I think we'll just see how it evolves and then we'll work from there. But in my experience, there haven't been service points in these spaces in other libraries. There's not a discernible desk that you go to. So people are in the area, they set up appointments, they book rooms, they let you know they're coming. And I haven't found that people get very upset if they come in and there isn't someone to help them right then. In most cases, there is someone who can adjust with them, but that's part of what we're going to have to figure out. And so we're beginning to work on that staffing plan.
So we are at time. I just wanted to remind you that if you had a question that we couldn't answer today, just please write it down on your note card, and you can just keep those at your table. And if you have any other questions, feel free to email me, Pat, Maggie. I just want to thank you all for coming today. I'm really excited about all of this, and I hope you are too. And I'm really looking forward to working with everyone in these new directions. So thanks so much, and have a great rest of your Monday.